Republicans. This is coming back on you people. This is all a bogus investigation, and it's time for you guys to lawyer up.
You are a Russian stooge who used to work for Vladimir Putin, and it is coming back around to get you.
I got to let Michael respond to that. Michael, respond to that, and then I want to read this statement.
Stooge?
Who served as a Trump campaign senior advisor. He wrote a piece back in April of 2015 raising questions about the Uranium One deal and the Clintons. And Zach Pecanis, a former senior DNC advisor who worked on the Clinton campaign, joined me tonight to go through the latest here on this. Michael, let me start with you. Your reaction to the news that the Washington Free Beacon in part paid for some of the opposition research against GOP candidates, and the dates on that were from fall of 2015 through spring of 2016.
I'm kind of shocked, actually, and frankly, that just means my return calls to the Washington Free Beacon will go unanswered from here forward. To me, I think that's out. It seems really out of character for a Washington media organization. But we're looking at a very different product that was put together after the Washington Free Beacon gave up the research and handed it off to the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee. It's only then, actually weeks after they started funding, the Democrats had Fusion GPS hire a British spy who then went out and talked with Russian spies who gave the British spy Russian intelligence information to give back to the Clinton campaign and the DNC.
I mean,
that smells a lot like collusion to me.
What we don't know here, there's been a lot of speculation about who on the GOP side paid for the early stages of this opposition research. And remember, obviously, as we've all claimed, all campaigns do opposition research. Whether or not there was any connection to any of the other candidates or any of their campaigns, we don't know yet. And we watched how the money was funneled through on the DNC side and the Clinton side through Mark Elias, his attorney. We don't know, what the case was in terms of who was generating, who was the client, and whether or not it was just the Washington Free Beacon and what they were exactly looking for, and whether or not they only used sort of the domestic auspices of Fusion GPS in order to get that opposition research. And Zach, as Michael points out, what changed in the game after that was the sort of acquisition of knowledge and bringing on board Michael Steele, who was British and who had connections to the Kremlin.
Well, whether it's the Republicans who paid for the dossier, whether it's the Democrats who paid for the dossier, or whether it was Big Bird that paid for the dossier, what matters is the content of the dossier and the leads in which reporters and investigators are able to follow or not. That's simply what it is. It is a document for investigators to be able to follow. Some of it may be rumor, some of it may be true, but it is not correct to say that large swaths of it have been discredited. Large swaths of it have not been verified, but that doesn't mean that it is completely worthless. In fact, the underlying premise of the dossier itself is that the Russians intervened in the election to help Donald Trump get elected, which is exactly what Donald Trump's own CIA director and his director of national intelligence themselves have both said.
Michael?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, we don't know that there was a Republican at the nexus of this research. We've only heard that through leaks to organizations like CNN. People talk about it like it's a truism. It's not. We don't know if there's a Republican there. I first started getting calls from reporters about this dossier in May of 2016, which apparently is a month after the Democrats took it over. So from my perspective, we're looking at a document that also has precipitated a legal complaint by a watchdog group that this was funded and the funding mechanism hidden by the Clinton campaign and the DNC. So this is not the innocent piece of research that you're trying to say there, sir. There's a lot more to this, and we need hearings to find out what really went on.
Well, one of the other big questions is the FBI and why it is that there's been some sort of effort in some ways to protect Fusion GPS. They pled the fifth when they went before Congress. Congress wants to know why they can't get their hands on the information that they've asked for. They have a deadline of Monday morning by which they want to see the list of all the clients that they worked for through the bank records of Fusion GPS. And, Zach, I understand what you're getting at in terms of the underlying information here and whether or not it has been verified. But I guess what a lot of people want to know is whether or not there was a concerted effort on the part of Democrats and even some involvement by the FBI potentially to find dirt on this candidate and to influence the United States election in that way.
The purpose of Fusion GPS was to expose the collusion by the Trump campaign and the Russian government. That was the purpose of it. It was not to find dirt on Donald Trump. It was to expose potential collusion between the campaign and the Russian government. That is not collusion with the Democrats. And I think it is pretty outrageous to suggest that the FBI is in doing something untoward. What they are doing are following leads. And of course, they're going to protect their sources and their leads and not allow partisan Republican hacks to get in the way of their investigation. Maybe the dossier is not true. Maybe it is true. But they are a bunch of leads brought by sources that may have some knowledge of this. So it makes sense. It would actually be incredibly inappropriate for the FBI.
Michael, and I want you to comment on this before we go, but you know, if it turns out that that dossier was used as a substance for the investigation that was opened and the unmasking that was done of members of the Clinton campaign team, it raises the kinds of questions that I brought up a moment ago, is whether or not there was sort of a concerted effort on the part of these parties to find a way to undermine the Trump campaign, Michael.
Well, no question. In fact, I've been told, informed by sources close to the intelligence community, that I myself was unmasked because of this dossier. And I've been told that it's not just 100 Trump associates or hundreds. It's over 1,000 that were unmasked. A lot of it due to the claims that were made in this dossier. And I'm telling you, I know some of the people who were used as sources in this dossier, Sergei Milium and others. It's a caricature of intelligence. And somehow or another, this cartoon has been driving some of the investigation into people like me and my friends and the President of the United States. This is a travesty. And by the way, the chairman of the campaign and the chairman of the DNC most definitely knew about this, and there is no way they weren't lying when they said they didn't.
If you were getting unmasked or being looked at by the FBI, maybe you shouldn't be having such weird conversations with potential foreigners and other unsavory characters. Michael
Maybe
Caputo.
you people shouldn't be breaking the law and lining up all
this
these
is a guy who used to work
in
for
the government,
Vladimir Putin.
unmasking people for innocent reasons. This is coming back on you people. This is all a bogus investigation, and it's time for you guys to lawyer up.
You are a Russian stooge who used to work for Vladimir Putin, and it is coming back around to get you.
I got to let Michael respond to that. Michael, respond to that, and then I want to read this statement.
Stooge?
Michael?
You work for Gazprom.
I'm sorry? Listen, you sit here and call me a Russian stooge. I served in the American military. I served my country. I'm tired of hearing accusations. I did not. You're lying through your teeth. I never worked for Vladimir Putin. You people on the Democrat side are so confused by your talking points that you just lie through your teeth. You make accusations of me working for Putin on national television. You better get a lawyer, buddy.
Hold on one second, guys. Hold that thought there before I have a statement here from the Washington Free Beacon, and we want to read some of it. It's rather long, but let's see what we can share with you and where the important parts in this are. Since the launch in February 2012, the Washington Free Beacon has retained third-party firms to conduct research on many individuals and institutions of interest to us and our readers. In that capacity, during the 2016 election cycle, we retained Fusion GPS to provide research on multiple candidates in the Republican presidential primary, just as we retained other firms to assist in our research into Hillary Clinton. All of the work that Fusion GPS provided to the Free Beacon was based on public sources, and none of the work product that the Free Beacon received appears in the Steele dossier. The Free Beacon had no knowledge of nor connection to the Steele dossier, did not pay for the dossier, and never had contact with, knowledge of, or provided payment for any work performed by Christopher Steele, nor did we have any knowledge of the relationship between Fusion GPS and the Democratic National Committee, Perkins Coie, and the Clinton campaign. Representatives of the Free Beacon approached the House Intelligence Committee today and offered to answer what questions we can in the ongoing probe of Fusion GPS and the Steele dossier. But to be clear, we stand by our reporting and we do not apologize for the methods. We consider it our duty to report verifiable information, not falsehoods or slander. And we believe that commitment has been well demonstrated by the quality of journalism that we produce. The First Amendment guarantees the right to engage in news gathering as we see fit, and you get the idea. Of the rest of that. You know, it's interesting because there has been since the beginning of this conversation, and as Michael Caputo pointed out, this suggestion that perhaps a GOP candidate, one of the candidates who was running during the primary, may have funded this research. Now, We don't know if this news discounts that or if it replaces that, but it appears that it might. It appears that the notion that a GOP side had also invested in this research may be answered in this question that it was the Washington Free Beacon, which is considered a conservative publication. Michael, before I let you go, do you think that that is what we're seeing here?
I think it is. And listening to their statement, I think opposition research firms often do research for publications and news organizations. If they were looking at Donald Trump's business ties and his different businesses and trying to find out if there's impropriety there, that's probably a legitimate use of a Washington research organization. It's when the Clinton campaign and the DNC decided to hire a network of spies to work with Russian information when things went a little awry.
All right. So the problem is, you know, under the FEC regulations, you're not allowed to hire international bodies to do this kind of research. You're supposed to register who you pay for and who buys that research under some of the election rules, Zach. So, you know, that looks like a problem for the Democratic side. I
have no idea what was or what was not done. I didn't know about the dossier or the Fusion GPS until after the election. But what I do think is a potential problem, if we're talking about coordination with a foreign entity, is what we learned yesterday, which was that Trump's data team was actually working with Julian Assange, a Russian cutout. And so I think that this
working with is not exactly accurate, you know, according to the report.
Just
stick to the facts, because we try to stay in the fact land here. What we do know about the story that Zach just mentioned is that there was outreach and that Julian Assange said, you know, I don't have them, or I don't want to work with you on that. If I want to put anything out, I'm going to put it out myself. So they
attempted to catalog all of the WikiLeaks stolen emails from WikiLeaks that the Russians stole from our campaign and from the DNC. So that is at least an attempt to work with.
You know what? That's going to be part of the investigation. If there's more to it than I just stated, we will certainly see. Michael Caputo and Zach Buchanan, good to have you both here tonight.
President would love for us all to focus on the legislative agenda a whole lot more. You look at the coverage over the last month of the extended period between May and June, all of the major networks, if you look at their coverage and what they're talking about, they spent 1 minute in the evening newscast talking about tax reform, 3 minutes on infrastructure, 5 minutes on the economy and jobs, 17 minutes on health care, and 353 minutes attacking the president and pushing a false narrative on Russia. I mean, look at that in comparison. If you guys want to talk about legislative agenda and focus on policy and priorities, you guys get to help set that table. And 353 minutes of attacks against the president and driving a false narrative, and 1 minute on tax reform. That's over the course of a month. That's incredible. The numbers, guys, the numbers don't lie. The media's focus on priorities, they don't line up with the rest of America. Right now, we've got our economy's growing, the stock market's up, unemployment is down, jobs are back, and ISIS is on the run. America is winning, and that's what we'd like to talk about. But you guys constantly ignore that narrative.
Go ahead, John. All of those points that you make, Sarah, about the positive elements of what the president's agenda are certainly true. All of those things are true. But the president today put out this tweet which takes away from all of that. And you expect us here in this room to simply ignore that? I think that's the valid question that should be asked of you right now. Should we just ignore this entirely?
I think he's put out a number of tweets on health care, on the immigration bills that'll be in the House today, but that's not being talked about. That's not being asked about. But the discrepancy, again, 353 minutes. You can't say that you want to talk about policy and then you look at the numbers and they just don't lie. You can't expect for that amount of attack and intensity to come on a president and him to never respond. John.